Hi, I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Sophie, and we are here to help guide you to the why behind your wellness why.
Come join us on our journey.
On today's podcast, one of my wonderful clients, Dr. Piper Skelly, will be joining us today, and we will be discussing alcohol and the effects of it on the human body, especially with dry January coming to a close for those of you that have participated in it. And with that, we are all going to say our favorite beverage because, again, we like to live in the middle here on this podcast. Personally, my favorite beverage is I like tequila and Sprite, or I like white wine. How about you, Chelsea?
I'm a diehard red wine girl through and through, will forever be, preferably like the most dry red wine you can get. That is 100% my go-to.
All right. Well, I'm Piper Skelly. I'm one of Sophie's clients, and my go-to, I'm a beer guy. I just like beer. It's pretty simple, and I stick with the beer. So just kind of a little introduction on who I am. I'm a vascular surgeon, and I've been working with Sophie for almost 3 years now. I think it's been a while.
Yeah.
And so I get to fix blood vessels, both the arteries and the veins, and it's led to a number of fun conversations. And the vasculature, it's important. I view it as kind of the lifeline to your body, and alcohol does impact it. So thank you for inviting me for this discussion. I love it.
Of course. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we're excited to get started. So we put a list of questions together that we personally have, but also questions that we get a lot from our clients. So we'll kind of run through those questions depending on, how quickly or how long in depth they go. We might have to break this into 2 parts, but we'll just, see how it goes. So Sophie, do you want to take it away to start with? Like, where do we want to start in this conversation of alcohol?
All right. Piper, if you can just give like a general kind of what happens to our body when we start drinking in general.
Okay. So in general, the alcohol is a relaxant. So overall, your body, you just start feeling better. You kind of relax and it takes the edge off. So, I think from a health perspective, my caveat is everything in moderation. It's I think the alcohol it affects a lot of different parts of your body, and you tend to start seeing the effects of it as you drink more and as time passes. So I think just in general, the effects on the brain, it is a relaxant. It then just, if you want to start going into the different body parts, because it does affect it. So your stomach, for example, you start feeling, actually alcohol itself can slow down your digestion. So that's why if you kind of drink quickly, everything kind of gets stuck in your stomach. You start feeling nauseated, and if you drink too much too quickly, the results of that.
Like bloated.
Yeah, you can throw up and bloating, all that great stuff. And then the other thing is it's a diuretic. So what does that mean? It makes you pee. It makes you pee.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, and then I think you see a lot of effects from that, because what happens with that is you can be dehydrated pretty quickly, and that just that makes you feel tired. It impacts your muscles. That impacts a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
It does affect blood flow. So blood flow to different areas. There are some cool studies that show the blood flow in the brain is altered. So less blood flow to what's called your cerebellum, or that's your kind of where balance is maintained. So, you get a little tipsy and you start feeling dizzy from time to time. The other place it does is it increases flow to the what's called the prefrontal cortex, or the front of your brain, and that's where decision making is going. So everyone gets kind of these, oh, I can save the world, I can
do anything.
I can do anything. And the male population is classic for this. It impacts blood flow to reproductive organs, and I'll be the doctor component here. And you've heard all the sayings what whiskey does to things. So it decreases blood flow in that area. If you think about it, alcohol it's a pharmacologic agent, and it impacts a lot of different things. So if you look at it from the medical side, it's a drug and it does have impact.
That is so interesting.
It is so interesting. And you touched upon a couple of things that I get questions a lot from, of course, like the nutrition side. So you mentioned about digestion, it can having an impact. So does eating around drinking have any impact? And then also same with, I get the question about electrolytes a lot. So, you hear like drinking electrolytes beforehand can help prevent a hangover, and same with like after a hangover can help it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think those are really great questions. I think the first question about, does eating actually help with the digestion of it? And the answer is yes. I mean, so the alcohol itself is broken down once it gets into your body. And that breakdown starts in the stomach. So actually, if you have food in your stomach, so you eat a meal before you have a drink or two, it actually decreases that breakdown, meaning it binds to the food and is brought further down. If you drink on an empty stomach, that's where it actually slows down the digestion component. It's absorbed into your blood system much faster, and it affects you much faster. So I think eating prior to going out and having a drink or so it does help kind of with the effects of the alcohol. Then with the electrolytes, I think this goes to the dehydration component to it, and it really can alter your electrolytes. There's never been a great cure for it. So, sports drinks will say, oh yeah, drink Gatorade, drink whatever, it'll make it better. I think just kind of this is where the moderation component is a benefit, because alcohol does affect your electrolytes. And you feel it afterwards. Your muscles ache, you lose potassium. If you drink so much where you are, you're throwing up and stuff like that. It really can make electrolytes out of control. So the digestion is impacted on the short term. Also on the long term, I think if you fall into that alcoholic realm where you're drinking a lot every day, the breakdown products of the alcohol actually go to the fat, it build up fat in your body. So to be specific, and I'm boring everybody here with this, but this is so fascinating. This is the chemistry. So it's alcohol to an aldehyde, which then goes to acetate and fatty acids. And that over time, it can build up, and it builds up in your liver. It can build up just in general in your body. And you see kind of long-term drinkers, they get really round stomachs and their legs are like chicken legs. So they lose muscle mass and they build up a lot of fat in that what's called central obesity. So that's where you can see the long-term effects of the alcohol. So it does. And again, this is where the moderation component is. If you drink a lot every day, it can be a problem.
Yeah, because you would say drinking alcohol doesn't really let you recover well overnight because you don't get as good of sleep and everything, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So alcohol it impacts circadian rhythms. It messes up everything, your body's kind of natural sleep cycle. And what is interesting, so this is some interesting work when sleep cycles have been disrupted. There are proteins that are produced. They're called ghrelin and leptin. They're these satiety proteins. So they're proteins that are formed that go feedback to your brain and say, you're full, stop eating. And when alcohol disrupts that sleep cycle, it disrupts that balance between those proteins. So that's why, gosh, in a hangover, you're just like, oh, craving that fatty food. And you just feel really tired. So your recovery is just that much more difficult. You really feel like you're jet lagged. You don't want to work out. You don't want to really do anything. So that's part of the challenge, because it does mess with your sleep cycle. I think you have to go back and ask the question, why did I end up here? What was my motivation for drinking? And, I think it's a really important question to ask, because, I think from medicine, we try to think of things in what's called a biopsychosocial model. So body, psycho, mind, social, kind of your environment. If you're drinking to relieve pain, that can be problematic. Now, if you're just drinking because you enjoy it, you love the flavors, I think there's, that's actually the healthy approach to why you have some alcohol.
I love that. And you brought up the why, which we talk about in every single one of our podcasts. That's why we named our podcast what it is because in every single episode we've done so far is we talk about why you are doing something. So yes, we're talking from that medical perspective, but kind of to your point, always going back to like, how did you get there? Why is this happening? All of that type of stuff, I think is really important. You've touched on moderation a couple of times, and Sophie and I both 100% agree. We're definitely in the mindset of everything in moderation as well. For drinking specifically, do you have recommendations on like what you consider moderation, or is there a way to quantify it, or is it very person?
Yeah, there are guidelines. So typically it's in terms of, I'm the beer guy, so 2 beers per male, 1 for female. There are guidelines in terms of the moderation component, but everybody's a little bit different. If you think about it, body types are different, so there's different metabolism of the alcohol, there's different distribution of it, so these are just guidelines.
Right.
And so, but there are, so women tend to be, drink lower amounts, and men tend to have more amounts. So 2 drinks for men, 1 drink for female.
That actually makes me think of something. And I don't know, I know there's obviously a reason, but I don't really know the science behind it. Maybe you do. Is that like, if I don't drink for a month and then I go out and have 1 drink, I feel it. But if, say, I were to have, 1 drink every weekend, I don't feel it as much.
Yeah, your body adapts. So again, cool chemistry in this, where your body regulates the protein and that kind of metabolizes the alcohol. So if you're not drinking a drink every day, that enzyme is not revved up. So your ability to metabolize the alcohol has lowered. That's a lot. So if you're drinking every day, you kind of rev up the digestion of it pretty easily. So it becomes part of your routine.
Like natural. Okay. Yeah.
Correct. And so the chemistry of it's that's worked out. It's worked out. I think people talk about different types of drinks too. So, is there one that you'd recommend? So no, as a physician, I'm not recommending any. What's interesting is, so Chelsea, you said you're a red wine drinker.
Yes.
And Sophie, you said you're tequila. So let's take that for a second.
Yes.
So when we think about alcohol, we think about what are called congeners, and that's the other stuff that's in with it. So Chelsea, good for you. Red wine, love it. It's got what are called phenols in it. And that actually has been shown to have, moderation, it's got really significant cardiovascular effects. So 1 to 2 drinks a day has been shown to lower mortality from heart disease. So there is some health benefit to it. Now, Sophie, tequila, the congeners in that, worms.
Oh, no.
You've seen those, with tequila, who has I would just, stay away. So those, it's those other things in the alcohol, in the beverage that can impact kind of how you feel afterwards. So
What about
I always,
whiskey?
yeah, no, so that's a great question. So those types of things, whiskey tend to have a lot more congeners in it.
Oh,
And so what's been here, we're going back to a little bit of chemistry. Um, it- with whiskey and brandies, they tend to produce a little bit of worse hangovers. So there's another type of alcohol that can be breakdown products of some of these congeners. So typically we think of ethanol in whiskey and brandy, and these other congeners, they can produce methanol, which is another form of alcohol. But the breakdown product from methanol, again, chemistry, it's very cool. It goes to formaldehyde. And formaldehyde is it's very toxic to the body. And that has been shown that has been shown to produce worse hangovers. And in general, that's where it can be very, very toxic if you have, the alcoholic kind of component to it.
yeah, in college anatomy, we would spray formaldehyde on our cats before like recovering them for the day.
Yes.
Sorry, people.
Well, you hear about alcoholics getting pickled, because
Yeah.
it goes to from it. So if pure methanol,
Oof.
and this is where the kind of the neurochemistry behind it, the neurochemistry behind addiction, when you have alcoholics who, again, social determinants, if they don't have money to buy alcohol, they'll just look for anything. The classic is antifreeze. It's got methanol in it, and that leads to blindness. So
Wow.
yeah.
Very
Stay
interesting.
away from it. And again, so it's a lot from the health perspective is determined by what else is in with the alcohol.
Yeah.
I do have one more question on that. So, what's the difference between red wine and white wine? So, does white wine not have the same health benefits as red?
No, great question. It's got the phenols in it as well. It's just the red wine tends to have a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah. But Sophie, look, you're French background, right? So this is known as the French paradox, where the French have a healthy living because in general they drink to moderation and they drink red wine. It's just part of their routine.
Yeah, I actually had to say one thing. So one time I trained my dad and he wasn't feeling too good one workout. And I literally go, Dad, did you drink last night? And he looks at me and he goes, Soph, I drink every night. And then we just started laughing. Yes.
Well, so when you have a lot of red wine, it causes worse hangovers than pure white wine because it's got more of those the kind of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about this might be a silly question. I don't know if it has an impact or not, but I know when I get the question a lot about it, kind of like you were saying, like, is there a quote unquote better alcohol than others? And to your point, we're not recommending that one is better. So when I have that discussion with my clients, we talk a lot about it from like a nutritional standpoint. So like what beverages have more sugar than others. So the example of like tequila, okay, tequila by itself, I'm not saying that's good, kind of to your point, you went into the science behind that, but like if you were doing tequila with a soda, then that piece of that soda is going to then add more sugar. When you're doing something like a mixed drink versus the just alcohol itself, does that impact the digestion any differently in a positive or a negative way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the specific answer to that. It goes back to, all right, so I view alcohol as, from a nutritional perspective, a lot of empty calories. I think there are a lot of carbohydrates. And I think the easy thing is that people will not use those in calorie counting. So if you're trying to lose weight, if you're thinking about it, you then make sure that you count kind of the calories and realize, like you had said, like, all right, if you have, if you rum and Coke and you add the Coke, well, you're getting a lot of sugar in with that. And it's not necessarily going to change the digestion, but you're just drinking now you're just having a lot of sugar that's going on. So think about, make sure you count it, think about what you're adding to it. And again, it gets back to the why. I mean, why are you drinking? Why are you trying to lose weight? Why? And I kind of focus on the why of it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you put it. And I tell my clients the exact same thing. On the other side, the other conversation I have with my clients is when they are counting it, notice what that impacts on their other nutrition habits. So I do unfortunately have some clients who have taken it to the extreme that they'll count it, but almost because they're like saving up. So they'll be like, oh, well, I only ate, 1,000 calories today because I was quote unquote saving up to go out. And then, of course, as we all know, then that impacts the next day of what they're eating, their relationship with food. So you're exactly right. It kind of goes back to that original question of the why, like, why are you drinking? Why do you want to lose weight? Yeah. So I 100% agree with that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm reading through our questions. I'm trying to see, Sophie, was there anything, I know we had talked a little bit about like the sleep and the recovery piece of it. Was there anything else from a specific like workout piece or exercise piece that you had questions about?
I mean, like, so you mentioning the guys with, the big kind of beer bellies and the chicken legs. Can you go into a little bit more of how it affects like muscular recovery at all, and like building, like allowing someone to build muscle?
So I think you have to think about it then from kind of the short-term effect of alcohol and then the long-term effect of alcohol. So the short-term effect is, I think you just get into this dehydration, electrolyte imbalance. And really, if you're looking to perform, if you're looking to work out, if you're looking to be at the height of physical activity, you are not going to be there because, when you're dehydrated like that, it's your body is, you're not able to perform at that level. So the other kind of components that the alcohol then begins to affect kind of long term is the stress hormones that are in your body. So, cortisol and the sympathetic system of your body. When you're hungover, you feel it. You're tachycardic, meaning your heart is racing. You get sweaty, and with that, you lose electrolytes. But over time, what ends up happening is that it really goes to kind of your sugar metabolism, and a lot then is converted to fat as opposed to the muscle. In addition, when you're at that level, the nutrition tends to be very, very poor. So, you hear about alcoholic diets. I mean, it's pure liquid calories. So there's very little nutritional value, and that's where kind of all the calories are coming from. So from a muscle perspective, that's where you get the muscle wasting. And there's classic story that we learned in medical school. It used to be that, and probably still is, the pretzels that they would serve in bars were fortified with vitamin B, because when you have these alcoholics, they're not getting a lot of their kind of basic elements to maintain a healthy lifestyle. So they're at least getting some vitamins through the snacks that were on the bar. So pretzels and beer. But I think that long-term effect, it's, you're beyond kind of the workout zone. If you're at that level, you're in a bad place.
What about at my level? Well, like, because I have a client that is like, I want to get rid of this belly. And he doesn't really have that, like, he doesn't really have like a belly, and I'm like, well, you got to sleep better, walk more. Like, it's multiple things, right? But he goes out and eats out a lot. And I think drinks every time he goes out and eat. And I'm like, well, you're not allowing your muscle to recover and you're just breaking yourself down.
Well, I think you got to question and say, this is where the neurochemistry component, and again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I think the neurochemistry component is the kind of your reward system, the dopamine system kind of in the brain. And what is it that that gets that dopamine going? So for me, for you, for working out. So you were a runner. You're kind of still a runner. I was a runner. I love that. It was that runner's high that I was after, right? So it's that opioid. You induce that post-run recovery, that post-workout. Your brain craves that. Now, for other people, that's food. So they're hurting, they're depressed, and so they just want to feel better. So when they eat, that those brain pathways are activated and it becomes a reward system. So you can get into a bad place if you're so depressed and your response is to eat or to drink, you get in a bad place. So it's breaking those neurologic pathways, breaking those habits that then you're after, and with helping your clients. So Chelsea, with you kind of with the nutrition component, Sophie with you with the workout component, it's breaking those habits. So that client he wants to get rid of it, well, okay, you need to figure out how are you going to change your life? Why are you looking to change it? Why are you eating so much and going out? You need to look to change that, to break those habits. And that's really tough. We're human. We love routine, and it's hard to change bad habits because, our brains are kind of reacting to it.
Yeah.
So you do that, Sophie, that's why you work out, right? You enjoy it. It's so, and the impacts of alcohol. It doesn't feel good and you can't work out. So that's kind of, when you're hungover, some people say that's an argument to, trying to teach my kids. Do I let them drink? Oh, if they experience a hangover once, hopefully they'll learn from that and not do it again.
Yeah, you think in college it was always like, I'm not going to drink ever again after one night out. And it's like the next day, cocktail in hand.
Well, so that, there's the peer group, right? So it's the biopsychosocial, there's the social element to it. Your peer group, you want to be, in the teenage brain, and we've talked about this, the teenage brain.
Yes.
To hell with parents. It's the social group that becomes your defining group, and the peer pressure becomes very important.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. You talked about habits. We did a podcast a little bit ago on habits, and it's so fascinating to talk about and think about that, like, root cause, or again, it just keeps going back to that why.
Yeah.
So absolutely fascinating. Wow. The last question that I have from my end is, which you kind of already touched upon this, but you had mentioned alcohol and stress, which you went in a little bit, but you threw out like the word cortisol. Can you specifically touch on that, on specifically with alcohol, like how alcohol does impact the cortisol levels? And I guess just a brief overview for individuals who might not fully understand what cortisol is.
Yeah. So great questions. And I think the challenge is they're not great answers. So cortisol is a stress hormone. And what that does is it allows your body to ramp up into a flight or fight response. I'm trying to think of a good example. Sleep deprivation. So you're constantly in this kind of hyperdrive, and it really can impact kind of how your body responds to things. So the long-term effects really can be devastating. So it affects kind of your overall mood. It can impact metabolism. And I think this, Chelsea, is kind of where you are getting with this, because what can happen is your body tends to hold on to things then. And if you're in a constant state of stress, it drives you to eat differently. But it also you start seeing this buildup of reserves, and this is kind of where the you can get fat buildup, and it can be very challenging. So I think an example of this is patients who are on long-term steroid use. We tend to see this. Steroids can impact the metabolism of fat, and you can actually see, boy, it really can change the way you look, the way you feel, and it can be really, really devastating. So, I think it's one of those things where it's a longer term type of effect that you just want to tend to avoid. And now, look, if you drink in moderation, this tends to not happen.
Yeah. So it sounds like everything is almost like a circle, right? Like alcohol impacts sleep, which then can impact stress, which then can impact, it's kind of like it's not necessarily all linear. It's kind of like this
It's
circle.
really challenging. The male components to this. So it's the fat it can cause like what's called gynecomastia, which for males, it's like it gives them boobs. You're great. And then the other thing is it can decrease other hormones. So on the male side, it actually can decrease testosterone levels. So, the long-term impacts of that, it can be pretty devastating.
Wow. Yeah, because when you're in a stressful state, I mean, your heart rate's elevated, is your temperature elevated?
Yes.
Like, so even I remember when I did a talk on sleep, it's like when you are sleeping, you want like your heart rate, your blood pressure, everything to come down because you want to be restful and let your body recover. And that can help with like your heart health and everything versus like if you're more stressed out, your body isn't resting and recovering as much as it could be and should be.
Correct. So this is the moderation component. So when you don't drink in moderation, this is where you begin seeing all these kind of negative side effects of the alcohol. So that's when you, with the moderation component, this is what your body can handle. So this is where you see kind of the upsides of the alcohol over time, or the congeners over time. So yeah, I think, the lesson kind of as much as you can is, why are you drinking? Why do you drink to excess? Just if you can avoid it, and just, for your dad, Sophie, it's kind of, he has a glass of wine every night with dinner. That's just kind of his routine. And actually that's healthy.
Yeah. He just had too much that one night.
Peer pressure. I'm sure he was out with friends.
Yes.
Okay, I do have one last question. I promise this is my last question. But you had talked about, this is just so fascinating to me. You had talked about the male hormone. What about female hormones? Is there any correlation that you're familiar with of alcohol potentially like over time on specifically female hormones?
That is a great question. I think so. Here you see the kind of the bias in medicine and science. There is not a lot of research on the impact of female, the effects of alcohol on females.
Okay.
So you see it in the males because it's boy, they study it, and that's a sexist biasm within science and medicine itself. All right, so this is a little side. A lot of the science that was done on the alcohol, it was done in mice. So if you think about it, they're making a lot of mice drunk. So there is, and the challenge is, so when you're doing science experiments, you want to control everything. So it's a very, very controlled experiment. So for years, experiments were done in one sex type of animal. So male Sprague-Dawley rats or male mice, and that was it. So so that you really can control the experiment. But it gets to your point, Chelsea, is, well, what happens in the females? And so there's actually a very large impetus now through the NIH to make sure that experiments like this are done in both male and female animals. So yes, Now, look, I'm sorry if any of your listeners are animal rights activists. I think I'm sorry, but I mean, it's the nature of the game. But now there is a push, and there is a recognition that a lot of research has not been done in female models meaning animal models. So I think there's a real push to catch up for that. But you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, you know what? We know in males, it gives them boobs and it makes they're all smaller.
Yeah.
But we don't know typically what happens in females.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And thank you for sharing that, because I do, majority of my clients are females, and they don't ask that particular question that I asked, but they bring a lot of nutrition questions that we obviously won't get into today about, like, well, I heard this because of this research. And I talk about that a lot, of how unfortunately in the research world, a lot of things are done or are researched from the men's perspective. So thank you for talking a little bit about that. That's really helpful. Is there anything else just from your standpoint, or Sophie, that you think we're missing? So like questions that should be answered, or just like big takeaways with this alcohol conversation?
My takeaway is the moderation. If you're going to choose to drink in moderation. That's all. I mean, that's the important part.
My takeaway is I'm going to stay away from tequila.
I do love a good margarita. So yeah. Yeah,
no, I can't do it. I just, no. Keep it simple for me.
So at the end of our podcast, we always do a food for thought for our listeners to take away just some information. So I know your big takeaway is moderation, but we also like individuals to have something to think about or journal about or do something with our conversation. So Sophie, do you want to tell everybody what our food for thought is today?
Yes. So we want you to think about how you've felt that alcohol has affected your body. Is it in certain ways more than others? Is it the night of, or like the morning after? Like, do you get the nighttime munchies or next day hangover food? How you feel you sleep, all of those things.
And message us on social media, on Instagram. Our Instagrams are linked, and let us know what is one thing you learned from this, because I know I even learned a lot. So I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Piper.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Have a good day.